Next video, we're going to talk about how to create the bokeh effect. You've seen that in photos before where you've got this really sharp subject in the foreground and then the background is out of focus. Maybe there's some lights there or just some, city lights in the distance, building lights in the distance, or maybe there's just some really cool light in the background to give it that texture and look like it's off in the distance. It helps your subject stand out a little bit more and create some dynamics to your image. So I'm going to show you how to do that effect with a brush, with a simple brush that's already in Photoshop that you can just create that and then create some really cool effects with that. So to start with, I'm just going to hit create new. And we're going to start with just a square format. So it's 1080 by 1080. Or 8 by 8 inches, whatever it is, just a square format. And I'm going to hit Alt Delete, Control Delete. There we go. So my background color is black. Control Delete will give me that background color to start with. And then I'm going to create a new layer, new blank layer. And what I'm going to do is I'm just going to create a brush. I'm going to actually pull this away so it can be off to the side so we can see it as we work. Okay. And what we're going to do is we're going to go to the brush tool. So it's already selected right now. And right now you can see I have a round brush selected. I'm going to open my brush panel so we can see this a little bit more. And then we're actually going to go into our brush settings we're going to use as well. If you don't see these in your workspace panel, you can go to your Windows drop-down menu and you've got brush settings and brush right here. So you can pull those open. I keep them right here because I use them quite a bit. So we're going to start with is pick the brush that you want, which is the round brush. We're not worried too much about the size just yet. Next thing we're going to do is we're going to go to the brush settings. And we're going to go to the brush tip shape size, which we've already got. We got it set up there. Next thing we're going to look at, actually no, with the brush tip, we're going to click on the spacing first. So right now the spacing is at 5%. We're going to increase that. And we're going to increase that a lot. We're going to go like over 250%. So you can see there's a percentage here. I'm at 285. So anything over 250 we want to be working with. I probably wouldn't go 400 or anything like that. So 250 to 350, somewhere in that range to space that out. And here's one thing we're going to do too. I'm going to go to my layers panel. I'll make sure I'm selected on this blank layer. I'm going to hit Control A. And what you'll see that my little marching ants come around that, I've just selected all of that artboard. And what that allows me to do is I can now use my brush tool, and I have white as my foreground color, but I can brush, and it lets me test to see what that looks like. So everything I do in here, when I do these little adjustments, I'm going to come over here and test it to see what it actually looks like. Okay, so right now it's hard to tell in this little sample thing here, so I have to actually use it to see what that looks like. And then I just hit Control Z to undo it. Okay, so go back through that again one more time. So once you do the spacing, remember the spacing is between 250, 350%, somewhere in there to space it out a little bit. Go to your layers panel, click on layer 1, and then click Control A to select all of it. So I've got the marching ants around it. Okay, so we started with the spacing, brush tips shape, and spaced it out a little bit. That's kind of where we're going to start with. Next thing we do is we're going to click on scattering, and I'm going to check that box, and I'm going to smooth down to it, okay? And what we're going to do is we're going to scatter, click on both axes, because we want to scatter vertically and horizontally as we do this. And again, with this one, we want to go with a really high number for that scatter. So I'm going to bring that up probably over 300%, somewhere over 300%. So 330, there's no exact number, but definitely over 300%. We want to move it quite a bit. And you can see when I test it, what it's doing is it's randomizing where that dot goes, where that brush goes. So before, without that, it was just kind of going in a straight line. Like, hey, I'm just drawing a straight line. It goes right there. But by having it scatter on both the vertical and horizontal axis, it randomly places it. So it gives it more of that kind of organic feel to it as we begin to use it. Okay. So right now it's working pretty good. It's scattering it, but they're all the same size. So it's not really something we want. It doesn't really look natural when it's all the same size. So next thing we're going to do is go down to go up to shape dynamics. And we want to have what's called a jitter on that. Okay, so I'm going to do the size jitter right here at the top. And this one, we don't need to go up as high. I'm probably going to go right around between 60 and 70%. So that's like 65, 66%. That's fine. What that's going to do is now when I paint with it, see how it changes the size automatically. It's like a jitter effect. It just naturally changes it from the small size to this bigger size. And what's cool is you can adjust the minimum diameter. So like right now, that's my smallest one. If I want my smallest one to be bigger, then it won't have as small a dot. But I want to keep that down to like 0. And so whatever the size of my brush is right there, that's going to be my smallest size. So if I went smaller with my brush, see how down here that adjusted? So if I go with a smaller brush, hit Control Z, get rid of some of these. Now when I do it, you can see I've got some smaller ones. So maybe I want to just kind of paint right there with some small ones. And then I'll increase my brush size and throw some bigger ones in there. So it automatically kind of adjusts the size of it as well. So really cool feature to kind of adjust that naturally. Instead of trying to change your brush and do individual dots, this kind of does it automatically. And now what we're going to do is we're going to go to, let's see here, we're going to go to transfer. So make sure that is clicked on. And we're going to do the opacity. We're going to do it at 100%. And what that's going to do is that's going to allow us to change the opacity of each circle randomly as well. So just like it kind of jitters and changes the size, now we can change the opacity from super opaque and you can't see through it to almost completely transparent. So that's going to give it that range of depth. Some are closer, some are further away. One thing you want to look at here is control. Right now it's selected on off. If you are using a Wacom tablet that is pressure sensitive or any kind of a tablet that has pressure sensitivity, you can actually change that to pen pressure. If you're using a mouse or trackpad, just keep it as off and it'll do it automatically. But what's nice about having the tablet with the pressure sensitivity is the lighter you push the pressure, the softer, the more transparent your dots will be. And the harder you press, the more opaque they'll be. So this, you just got to kind of go with it. You can see some are really light gray, some are white. So that's super opaque. This is kind of more transparent. That's way more transparent. So you can see there's a lot more variety here. That alone looks like a very natural bokeh background, right? We're going to do a couple more things to tweak it to make it look a little bit better. But really, that's kind of the basics of it. That's really where we're at. One thing I want to do is I'm going to go back to my brush tip shape, and I'm going to drop the hardness. Right now, the hardness is at 100%. Control Z and get rid of that. I'm going to drop it down to about 65%. So I'm softening the edge a little bit, and I'm going to do that same thing. And you can see I've got a softer edge to it. So now it looks a little bit more natural, a little bit more out of focus, right? So that's a really cool way to do that. And right now I have it set on white. So if I wanted to, let's go to Windows. Where's my swatches panel? I could easily change this to yellow. And it does the same effect with yellow or any color that you want. So you can select colors to change it up. One thing I want to show you, so you can change colors individually and do that. Hit Control Z a few times here, get out of that. I'm going to go back to my brush settings. And right here where it says color dynamics, this is totally optional. This is a selection or thing you can do depending on the work you want. So if you want to have just one color on a bokeh background, that's totally fine. If you want it to look more like a cityscape in the background with buildings, with that, sometimes the lights are different colors. There's some oranges and some greens in there, some different colors. But if you wanted to have some changes with that, you can actually change the color dynamics, and you would change the hue jitter to like 100%. So the hue jitter right there, 100%. Now, every time you click, it'll change the color. So if I click once and drag, it's red. I let go and I click again, changes it to green. Click again is yellow. So you can see it's literally changing the colors automatically as I let go and release and create new stuff. So that's a really cool look for maybe some kind of a cool scene on like a pier or harbor. You got some blues and greens, some reds in there too. So it looks like a cityscape background. One last thing you can do, if that's not enough for you, if maybe you want a little bit more of a blur to it, you can go to your filter gallery and go to blur and put a Gaussian blur on it. And right away you can see I'm at 23 pixels. That's a lot. Let's just slowly bring it up there. But you can see I can blur that out even more, right? So this might be really nice for something you want farther in the background. Hit OK. And then I'll create a new layer and I'll go and do my same thing. But now these are a little bit more solid, so they look like they're in the foreground a little more. They're a little bit closer, right? So you can create depth by adding new layers and then adding a Gaussian blur to each of those layers to make some look further in the distance, or no blur to make it look like it's more in the foreground. So that is a really quick way to have more control and create a bokeh effect in your photos.